Throughout the dungeons, spectral chains shatter in silence. Often invisible or only seen trailing off into walls or floors of the caverns of the dungeons attached to spectral rooks, there's actually a short window of time when Sybil pierces the spectral rook spider's spinneret, when the entire dungeons can see the complex web of chains that has been crafted through every cavern, tunnel, and more. We see the people of Oubliette stare at the enormous cavern in a brand new light as crisscrossing patterns of spectral chains make a physics-defying obstacle course of dull, glowing green chains. Elsewhere in the dungeons, these are the same. We see settlements of people staring at places they look at every day and not noticing that there has ever been a chain right along this path or right across this tunnel. All at once, the chains pulse in a light before breaking into infinitesimal pieces that fade into the darkness once more. Areas previously inaccessible due to spectral rook presence or sightings now become traversable and lead to new settlements throughout the dungeons. Fossil sites become a little less dangerous, and all of those rooklings return to their many homes throughout the dungeons, no longer pulled along invisible threads to become yet another link in the spider's spectral chain web. Then we return to Sybil, Zorn, and the rooklings, down in the heart of the web. Sybil pulls her spectral spear free and turns back towards her friends, slowly, nervous that she will not see her ice rookling friend, who underwent the transformation at the Rookling Forge to become spectral, or at least phase-like, like all of these spectral rooks that she just watched disappear. We are going to flip a card from the deck to see if our little rookling friend has survived after becoming a phase ice rookling. That is the Queen of Clubs. That is a black card, a face card, which is a yes with a bonus. So obviously our little ice rookling friend is here, and not only is he here and still somewhat phasing in and out between these two states of matter, but there's even something more to him. I don't think we're going to dwell on that at the moment. I think, more importantly, Sybil runs to the rookling and falls to her knees to embrace it. Don't you dare leave my sight again. Do you hear me? The rookling looks up at Sybil and nods, leaning into her embrace, and then she pulls back and looks down at him. And just in case you wander too far, I'm gonna need to call you back. So, how do you like the name Brash? The ice rookling nods more vigorously and headbutts Sybil's shoulder. Good. Good. Me too. Hello everyone, and welcome to the finale of Colossal Dungeons. I hope that you're enjoying this series. Welcome to March as well. It is a brand new month here on the Rene Plays Games podcast. It is actually a very influx month, but we are obviously ending Colossal Dungeons with the first episode here. It is a 5 Tuesday month, so there will be a bonus episode. Next week's Perspective Checks is likely going to be an interview that I did with Lawrence Phillips, aka Hardy Roach Games, about a Kickstarter that they have coming up. It has just been pushed back. We were going to release this in March alongside that Kickstarter kickoff, but it has been pushed back to May. So if I can finagle another interview in that little window and get it edited and everything like that, I may save Lawrence's interview until May to coincide with the Kickstarter. But we talked about Giallo, which is an Italian kind of murder noir slasher film genre And they have a really great game coming out in the near future called, I'm going to butcher this, Il Fantasma del Giallo, or Phantom in Yellow in Italian. Then I'm going to play just a tabletop tutorial with my wife. She actually bought me a book based on someone who she works with, knowing someone who made a game. So I was like, oh man, this is too serendipitous to not just make happen. And it happens to take place in the city of Providence, which is in Rhode Island, which is where we are from. So it just works out that way. We're going to do that to create a little buffer between the Colossal series and the next series. Then we have our Design Diaries, episode 3 for Gardens of Rust, which I'm going to dive into the GM role and do a little bit of, I think maybe like solo actual play, just to kind of show how the mechanics work, how the phases work. And then the bonus episode this month, I think I'm going to try and commit to putting out Deck Detectives, so there will be a game release at the end of this month. We'll see if I can do that. Then, next month, not to get way ahead of ourselves, we'll start the next series, my next solo series here on the Rene Plays Games podcast, which is going to be a series of the One Ring 2E. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. We need to neatly wrap up this series of Colossal Dungeons. We see Sybil and Brash. Now, if you heard the name Brash and thought to yourself, like being reckless or kind of like rudely confident, actually Brash is a term for like ice flows or like ice sheets. It's a term for drift ice. So I went with that. I thought that was appropriate. And we see Sybil and Brash walking. Zorn and the other two Rooklings are giving them a little bit of space to reconnect after everything that's happened, but we eventually see them return to Oubliettes. The dungeons feel a bit different now. I think everyone in Oubliette is abuzz. I think that there's a lot going on here, that Sybil very casually walks in like, I had nothing to do with this, please don't look at me. And not that she would think anybody would assume she did have anything to do with it. She's just a random surface dweller, roomlander, who fell down here and has, made friends with a few people. She's connected with a few people here in Oubliette, etc. But when she finally does reconnect with some of the clan leaders and some of the friends she's made, like Lisette and Telena, I think that she tells them the truth. The clan of Cups is very appreciative. Obviously, the clan of Keys is very appreciative. Gorin and the clan of Rings, equally appreciative. I think that, and not to tie this into the actual canon events of the Dungeons book, if you were to get it and play it, which I highly recommend you do, because the more I looked into the major labyrinths I didn't do, which are like requisite for doing the storyline in the Dungeons book, and then what comes in like the final chapter is really, really cool. I think that Monith and the Cult of Shards probably like is not there anymore. Like no one knows where they went when this happened. They're just gone. But I think that we are just going to do a little epilogue session here and talk about Sybil as she says goodbye, but not forever, to the people of Oubliette and the dungeons. Don't forget, she has a waypoint stone. Sybil has a waypoint stone with a waypoint set in Garden, the head of the Clan of Cups in Oubliette. She has a waypoint set in Castle Revolving, which is crazy. She's not going to use that one anymore. But she also has one set near an exit that will take her up and out of the dungeons into the Roomlands once again. I believe we said not far from the city of Parapet, which she calls home. So this isn't goodbye forever. She can go back to the surface, set a waypoint, and then use her waypoint stone to revisit her friends here whenever she wants. Come visit down in the dungeons. Honestly, she can probably take people from the dungeons up to the surface if they want, if our bending of the rules to travel across waypoints with people works the same. So this is a really interesting development, and I think that Sybil is not one to make this widely known, at least at first. And Sybil herself, eventually maybe she does bring Lisette up to see Parapet, or she brings Telena up to ride her mount across the fields of the Colostle and the Roomlands. But I don't think this is something where Sybil is willing to be part of like a new transportation service, if you will. But I think that there's a few scenes that we need to have in Oubliette and need to have in the dungeons before we go back up to the surface to have a scene or two. The first is we never found the labyrinth where the Goblet of Healing was for Lisette. And I don't think that that's something we're going to do here or in the epilogue. We're not just going to hand wave it and say that Sybil finds it, cool, yay, done. I think that instead what happens here is Sybil does promise Lisette that she will come back and she will help her find it. But Lisette also tells Sybil that she doesn't have to. This has kind of been Lisette's take on Sybil this whole time. It's like, you don't have to put all of this on your shoulders. You know, this isn't you or no one will do it. Maybe it's time the Clan of Cups works with the other clans, and maybe we send members of our group out with members of the Clan of Keys as they investigate new areas or dangerous places, and we have someone there to heal them. It's not just focusing on Oubliette. If the dungeons are even a little bit safer, you've done more than enough, Sybil. And Sybil doesn't know how to take that, but she says, if I stop now, I don't know, I'd get going again. And Lisette says, you've earned that too, whatever you choose. And then, of course, it goes to Talena, who is now able to roam. Her Clan of Keys is able to roam more of the dungeons. And I think that Sybil promised her at one point, I think that the scene that we just see with them is, and this isn't just now, I think that this is over time. Like even when Sybil is returning and coming back, Sybil works on the mounts in the Clan of Keys headquarters. I think that Sybil learns a lot from vehicles and mounts down here, what's needed in the dungeons, how they differ, what features and adaptations they need to deal with the dungeon's terrain, and what she can bring in from the Roomlands upstairs, and vice versa, what she can bring in from the dungeons when she goes back to the surface and works on her mounts again up there, if that's what she ends up doing. And I think that the adventures don't stop. I think that Sybil absolutely returns back and forth all of the time. Oubliette is a second home to her now. But there's somebody who she needs to see home too, and that is Zorn. So I think that Rookling Revolving is going to stay with Zorn as a companion. I think that the Rookrot Rookling is going to stay with Zorn, or maybe stay at the monastery, but Sybil and the Rooklings bring Zorn home to the monastery where he was sent out of to investigate why Rooklings were going missing. Sybil sees the monastery for the first time. She's never been there. We met Zorn out in the dungeons itself. So when she sees it, I think that we described it as almost like tiered levels on the side of a cavern wall that kind of cascade out into wider and wider platforms. It's beautiful, and down here I think it's mostly bastions and Rooklings that live here. And Sybil finds it so peaceful. They have found a place to be productive and do what they do, and I think that more people come here now. I think that it is becoming a more welcoming place. The Rooklings are returning. All of the Rooklings that left, like we said in the intro, are no longer being pulled by some invisible chains, some spectral chains that they'd inadvertently touched, been grabbed and pulled along by the invisible web of the spectral spider. Now they can return back to the monastery to continue doing what it is they always do. That means that the Rookling Forge is now a really interesting place, and I believe that upon Zorn's return, he is given great accolades and thanks from the monastery and the monks there, the bastions. I think that he's offered higher positions, but instead, I think what he chooses to do is return to the Rookling Forge and find a way to study it and repurpose it for something that will give the Rooklings who choose to come here something that maybe they feel like they've been missing, right? Because Rooklings are pieces of larger rooks. They are in the hearts, they are in the cores of larger rooks. And that is usually you can get them out of them if you defeat a large rook or what have you. And maybe there's something that Zorn, in his communicating with these Rooklings, can do to grant them more agency or power over their own lives. We'll obviously put a waypoint at the Rookling Forge as well, so we can always come visit Zorn either here or at the monastery. The waypoint stone, I think, has something crazy, like 20 different places you can attach waypoints to. So Sybil is going to be fast traveling all over the surface and the dungeons in a very interesting way. She's no longer living a normal life in Parapet as a rooksmith, even when she returns, which we're going to get to shortly. This is going to be a short episode. I just really like to think about the denouement, right? The big thing that we needed to do is done. Like, how does the world change and how do people now live in that? Zoom in on those smaller moments. Similarly, the Clan of Rings, led by Gorin, and member of the Clan of Rings and friend of Sybil's from the very beginning of when she fell down here into the dungeons, Torug, they were dealing with a organization that was messing with things down in the dungeons, and I think that Sybil comes down and checks in on them, and I think that they are getting ready to move out, and Sybil did promise, she would go find the labyrinth and get through and stop these people, and I think that, in time, we can even hand-wave this one. She joins them, but it's a coordinated effort now, I think. In a strange way, Sybil is realizing that by breaking these chains, these spectral chains that had a strange hold and power over the dungeons and the way that the denizens below the surface of the Roomlands and the Colossal had to live, by breaking those chains, she has forged new links between people who no longer have to look over their shoulder because they're worried about a spectral rook being somewhere, or they are part of one group doing one thing, but those other people are doing something else, and we don't have the bandwidth, or we don't have the power to do more. And I think that the relief of these chains being gone, and Sybil being a new sort of way to spread these connections and prove that this person trusts me, you can trust each other, leads to Oubliette expanding out into the nearby caverns and tunnels, and maybe not expanding as a city, but working more together. The Cult of Shards is missing, and that's definitely something that a lot of people are going to be looking for. They can move into the cathedral, and actually, you know what? Let's zoom in on that as well. I think Sybil goes to the counter where she normally would trade in her shards and finds it empty. And she moves to the door that she was let through that one time to meet Monith, the leader of the Cult of Shards, and she pushes it, and it creaks and pushes into the echoing emptiness of the cathedral and the large open spaces and walls of this area, and no one is to be found, and nothing. They took almost everything. Anything that wasn't bolted down or just, used to hold something else is gone. And no one knows where these people went. That may be an adventure for another day. Where did the Cult of Shards go in the dungeons? Eventually, Sybil does need to return to the surface. And I think she backtracks a lot, and she goes to different places to place waypoints, and in a weird way, she's not rushing back to her old life because it's never going to feel the same. Given what she's found down here, given that it proved a lifelong dream of hers, of unique rookstones, and again, bending the rules from core Colossal, you can find unique rookstones out there in the Colossal and the Roomlands, but to Sybil, and when she fell down into the cistern, it was the first time she'd held one, she'd seen one, she'd known. And going back up to the surface to a rooksmith shop if she still has one, a workshop. She loves her work. She's very good at her work. But it's different now. And eventually, her and Brash walk out of Oubliette, say goodbye, hugs, waves, I'll be backs. But she wanders out into the dungeons again towards the area where, and I think she even set a waypoint here, but I think that they walk out of the city for a little bit first, just to clear their heads and walk. And eventually they reach this area where they'd met those very spoiled, I think we said they were something like nobles or rich people who decided to come down here to see what was up. And they were disappointed in what they found. They were like lost in a labyrinth. But Sybil finds the way back up. And it's going to be an uncomfortable climb and hike, but she's willing to do it, obviously. She's been through worse down here. And when she does finally reach the top kind of area where she can see sunlight from the Colostle and the Roomlands above shining through, and she can walk towards it out into the light, back into the Roomlands she's known her whole life. She stands out, and the brightness is overwhelming. It takes a while for her eyes to adjust to the natural light of the Colossal. And same with the Ice Rookling, they throw their hands up and kind of try and block all the light. And then, over time, the two of them let their eyes adjust. And the Ice Rookling seems a little scared, maybe? And Sybil says, It's alright. It's bright. It's open. Yeah, the sky, huh? Don't worry. And she points to Parapet and says, that's where I come from. And again, we can't read the body language of the Ice Rookling, but he seems uneasy. And she says, it's alright. You're with me. You'll get used to it. It's a little different. I got a little room above a shop there. I don't know if we're going to stay. Maybe we do what we do and we continue to walk around. I don't know. You think you're up for that? And the Rookling looks at Sybil and nods bravely and kind of tries to put on a brave face. And she says, it's alright. We're going to be just fine. Trust me. This place is a different kind of scary, but I can handle these people. And before we move on, I just want to put a pin in this, and when I end the episode, I want you to remember how I just described this little Ice Rookling reacting to the surface of the Roomlands. But we're going to continue with Sybil's point of view as we head towards the city of Parapet. Eventually, the two of them reach the city of Parapet and the gates that are open wide. And I've never run the city of Parapet in either of my Colossal series, so I'm not going to begin trying to dive into the tons of stuff that you can do in this city. A whole campaign in the Roomlands book is wonderfully done, and you can do a ton from there. But Sybil simply walks through one of thousands and thousands of faces, not a single person that anyone should be surprised is home or has been missing for an extended period of time. But eventually she reaches her little neighborhood, and people do realize that she's back. And eventually there's a crowd outside of her workshop. And when she arrives at her workshop, she finds that it is totally different. It is not her shop anymore. It was bought by that gentleman that bought it at an auction. If you recall, it was a cold open a few episodes ago, and he went in and he found some interesting contraptions and puzzles and mechanical things that she had made in addition to her rooksmithing that Sybil was known for. And Sybil stands outside and says, well, this was my shop. And she looks down at the Rookling and she just says, I guess that answers that question for us. And Brash looks around and people are like, no, Sybil, please, you're back. Listen. And they start to tell her, this place was bought, but it's never really... It's only been a few weeks. We thought you were dead. We thought you disappeared. Somebody said they saw you drop down from a harvesting. You were over at the giant rook, and it collapsed and crumbled. People thought you died. People thought you were gone. And Sybil says, "Yeah, you wish." She's being her typical hard self that she was for everyone for most of her life up here, and she realizes that she's not as bothered by this as she thought she would be. In a way, there's relief that she doesn't have to come pick up this responsibility and try and do this again. It's actually a clean break. And I think that she says, it's fine. I'll handle this, to the crowd outside. And then, like any movie, they kind of crowd around the window and look inside as Sybil and the Rookling walk in. We hear the little bell of the door open, and she walks in, and there's that man who bought this store, and he's got lots of parts and, prices on the wall and services that he can provide and all of these things. And Sybil just walks in and says, "Hey there, how you doing?" And the guy's eyes go wide, and he says, "Sybil? Oh, and he goes, "I got the paperwork. I got this place fair and square. I'm sure you'll be compensated, but I kind of..." And Sybil says, "Relax. It's yours. It's fine. My stuff, though?" And he says, yeah, I didn't get rid of it. He goes, "It's still mostly back here. Upstairs he goes, I got my own place." He goes, "Upstairs is just like you left it." He goes, "I was going to start subletting it, or leasing it out, letting someone rent it." He goes, "But I haven't touched it yet." And Sybil says, "Let me just grab some things. And trust me, it's all yours." And the guy looks shocked, but Sybil walks into the back and grabs some schematics that she'd been working on, grabs maybe one of the puzzles, grabs a few things of like her parents and the story maybe that her mom told her whole life, things like that. Goes up to her apartment, grabs a few things that she wished she wore the day that she fell through the hole in the ground down into the dungeons, but mostly leaves just about everything. And I think that she turns to the little Rookling and says, "I don't know about you, but this place is a little stifling." And the Rookling slowly nods. He seems to like it more inside of this building than he does outside into the city. And she says, "Yeah, I think it's time we find a new place." So Sybil and the Ice Rookling, just like that, come and go and leave Parapet. Sybil, of course, leaves a waypoint somewhere in the city and tells people that she'll come back and visit. There's very few people here that she really needs to see very often, but it's a convenient place to leave a waypoint. And she does so in a very inconspicuous place that she's sure isn't going to get found by guards or anything like that and then removed, because I don't even know if these are physical places, but she obviously does it somewhere that she's not just going to teleport into a busy area or make a big scene. In the dungeons, it's a little different, but up here, she thought a little more carefully. And then, next thing we know, Sybil and Brash are wandering the Roomlands. Sybil says, "You up for a real adventure?" And Brash nods. And the two of them set off to find a boat to maybe cross the moat, which is a new book in the Colostle series, or maybe they make their way to the desert of Alcazar, which is the current Patreon releases that are coming out from Nick and the Colossal line. Either way, they wander off. But before we just let them walk into the sunset, we're going to shift perspective quickly and look through the eyes of Brash. Back in the beginning of this episode, we flipped a card to see if he was even there. And we got a Queen of Clubs, which said yes, and there's a bonus. He's still a little ice phase Rookling now that he has undergone the Rookling Forge transformation with the unique Rookstone that allows him to exist in both states at once. He was able to interact with the spectral chains throughout the dungeons once he had accomplished this and undergone this forging. And now those chains are gone. In the dungeon, what we see when we look through Brash's eyes at the expansive, infinite size and rooms of the Colossal is something else entirely. Not necessarily the walls or the rafters or anything, but almost like a strangely shaped dome surrounds parts of the Roomlands, and maybe there are symbols written in this kind of spectral state of matter floating in the sky. Maybe there are invisible, enormous, gargantuan, colossal-sized rooks, but these are just enormous crystals or something in that spectral plane of existence, floating in the sky, half submerged in the ground, jutting out of the ground, sticking through walls. And the only one who can see them is Brash. And that leaves the door open, but this is me closing the door on this series of Colossal Dungeons. I really hope that you all enjoyed this short, but hopefully a little satisfying epilogue of Sybil's adventures falling into the dungeons of the Colostle. As always, if you like what I'm doing, find me on social medias where I pretty much just post pictures of games and or when a new episode drops. But if you want to get in touch with me, you can message me on any of those apps or email me directly at reneplaysgamespod@gmail.com. Rate and review on your podcatcher of choice, and join the DMs After Dark Discord. That's a great place to come chat. We just, I think, hit 50 people in there. There's enough people that you can have conversations with new people all the time, but if we're talking Gardens of Rust size, that's the difference between a D4 community and a D6 community, so we are a growing, and there's always great talk in there. Pets, memes, games, you name it. And yeah, I think that's really all I got. I love Colossal. I love returning to this game. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that it makes you want to play this game. Until next time, don't be afraid to just walk away. Or, if it's not that serious, just try something new.